Greetings, this is part 3 of 3 episodes on Gurdjieff Centres. So this is my final episode on this little series on centres, because putting all this together, there was so much and I didn't really know where to go with it all. So that's why I divided it up into 3, and this time I'm going to do Ouspensky and maybe some C.S. Nott. So with Ouspensky, obviously he worked with Gurdjieff, was learnt so much from him, though he understood the system very well. And though he reminds us, or Ouspensky, apparently his dying words were, "There is no system." I wonder if it's because he was meaning there is no system to follow mechanically. You have to make the system your own, is what I believe he was saying. You do this work and you do it your way, but you've got the skeleton, the outline from the books given to you by Gurdjieff and Ouspensky's book, of course, In Search of the Miraculous, which is where most of these following quotes are going to come from. So he was saying, this is from meetings of recordings, or records of meetings from Ouspensky. The division of a centre into 3 parts is very simple. A mechanical part works almost automatically. It does not require any attention. Now, I talked about that in a previous episode of these 3. So it would be handy if you watch part 1, part 2, and now part 3. So Ouspensky says it continues to work in the way it started when circumstances have completely changed. The mechanical part of the intellectual centre is called the formatory apparatus or formatory centre. It can count only up to 2. It divides everything into 2, e.g. proletarians and capitalists. The work of the emotional part requires full attention, but this attention does not require any effort. It is attracted and held by the subject itself, very often through identification, which is usually called interest, enthusiasm, passion, or devotion. And the intellectual part includes in itself a capacity for creation, construction, invention, and discovery. It cannot work without attention, but the attention in this part of the centre must be controlled and kept there by will and effort. And I was talking about this in part 2, the previous show I did to this. We need to control all that disorganized chaos that's going on in our minds. And Gurdjieff was saying about how it's emotional and using your formatory apparatus. But Ouspensky here makes it clearer, and that it should be to do with will and effort. And we're supposed to be putting effort to do this work, and we're supposed to be developing our will. It's one of the most important parts of our chemical transformations, developing your will, W-I-L-L. Because without will, we do not do. We need the will to do this. We want to desire to do this. We need the will to drive us forward to do it. Bit controversial maybe, but I think Aleister Crowley writes one of the best books ever on developing the will, and that's in his book Magic, with a K. And I know many people poo-poo Crowley, fine, that's great, you know, whatever, but his writing on developing the will, he knows how to develop the will, which may be why people didn't like him, because he was a developed person, but maybe a bit fragmented. Anyway, this is very important from Ouspensky. The moving and instinctive centres are 30,000 times faster than the intellectual centre. The emotional centre, when it works with its proper speed, is 30,000 times faster than the moving and instinctive centre. And if you remember in my last episode, I was saying about how Gurdjieff says we must use the emotional centre to get control of the intellectual. Well, maybe that's because it is the fastest one. It's moving much quicker than the intellect. You know, our emotions hit us hard, don't they, when they suddenly spring out from nowhere, or something happens to us that makes us react or act, makes us, you know, speedy on what we're feeling, and them emotions kind of overtake us. But if we have control of our emotions, then hopefully we can have control of everything else. Our emotions quickly affect our intellect, and as I was saying in the last episode, all of our centres have 3 other centres within them. So if the emotional centre is reacting very fast, it's probably reacting also and telling the emotional centre in your brain centre, in your mind centre, what to do. You know, they're probably all connected. So that emotional centre is overtaking the intellect But Ouspensky reminds us about how Gurdjieff talks about the method of the fourth way. And he's saying, while working on the physical body, to work simultaneously on the mind and emotions. And he reminds us that Gurdjieff always spoke about the intellectual, the emotional, and the moving. Ouspensky writes, all the activity of the human machine is divided into 4 sharply defined groups, each controlled by its own mind or center: thinking, emotional, moving, and instinctive. So the 4 centers are thinking, emotional, moving, and instinctive. And I was telling you yesterday about how instinctive is how you breathe, your body, how your heart pumps. It's just doing it all instinctively, not necessarily mechanically, but instinctively. It knows what it has to do. And Ouspensky then reminds us the most complete knowledge of a given subject possible for us can only be obtained if we examine it simultaneously with our minds, our feelings and sensations, which is what I've been saying throughout these shows. We've got to learn to bring the centers together so they all work together so we can be harmonious. And I'm just reading these quotes because maybe they make more sense than what I'm waffling on about. It's better to go to the source. I've always said that. Go to the Gurdjieff source, go to the Ouspensky source. So this is a bit of a long quote here. This is page 109 of my copy of In Search of the Miraculous. Each center has its own memory, its own associations, its own thinking. Each center consists of 3 parts: the thinking, the emotional, and the moving. Wrong working of centers, working of one center for another, useful in certain cases, but in becoming habitual, becomes harmful, which I think, I'm just cutting in here, is one of the problems about becoming mechanical, and we're all programmed. And then we keep making the same mistakes over and over again because we're doing what he's saying there. We're using the wrong centers and it becomes harmful. We need to break that programming and instead use our centers in the correct way. So continuing. Each center shirks its own direct duties and does what it likes best at the moment. Isn't that human? In a normal, healthy man, each center does its own work for which it was specially designed and which it can best perform. There are situations in life which the thinking center alone can deal with and can find a way out of. If at this moment the emotional center begins to work instead, it will make a muddle of everything. This is being unbalanced or neurotic. How many times are we unbalanced and neurotic? And that's all because our centers are not doing the right thing, or not doing what it should be doing, or working for another center. And so we become unbalanced. And normally we should be able to feel when we're unbalanced, because when we start working our centers, we're all harmonious. It's a totally different feeling. I'm sure many of us were quite made unbalanced by the last few years that have been going on, the shit show of 2020 and 2021. And we're still recovering from that. So this is why it's even harder to work on ourselves, but it's even more imperative that we do it at these times, because these are the times that it's needed to be done. We need to develop ourselves to get ourselves through this and to help the harmonious workings of the divine and not let the dark forces take over, which they will try and do. And they will come looking for people like ourselves that are working on ourselves. So even more to be prepared. Where was I? There are situations in life in which the thinking center alone can deal with and can find a way out of. If at this moment the emotional center begins to work instead, it will make a muddle of everything. Well, I've done this bit. This has been unbalanced and neurotic. Obviously, we needed to have that read again. The thinking center working for the emotional center brings deliberation into situations which require quick decisions and makes a man incapable of distinguishing the peculiarities and fine points of the position. Thought is too slow. Well, our mind does bring confusion in, because sometimes it says, oh, maybe we should look at it this way, or maybe we should look at it that way. That's a good thing to look at things from all ways, from all sides, but it starts making us doubt ourselves. And we need to be centered enough so that we know that what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're doing is the right thing to be doing. But sometimes the emotional takes over. And as he was saying here, we become unbalanced and neurotic, and we start doing crazy things. So we need to be aware of whether it's craziness trying to take over. It's a very difficult thing doing all this work. and looking at ourselves, because sometimes where we've got them patterns of how we are, and neurotic thoughts or them neurotic ways of being, because we're so programmed into doing that, breaking them, there is another part of us that doesn't want to, because it's familiar. We want to do the same things that are familiar, even though they might be wrong. But it's like that old saying of, you know, better the devil you know, rather than breaking free and doing the right thing and going for new frontiers, going forward in new ways. And Ouspensky reminds us that all three centres work on different levels. You will then see that you think, feel, act, speak, work without being conscious of it. And this is the whole point of bringing these centres together, so that we're becoming conscious of what we're doing, conscious of how we speak, how we act, how we react, how we're being. You know, this is all about being, developing ourselves. And he reminds us that the thinking or intellectual centre is the slowest of the three. And this is for those that like the hydrogens. Here we go, hydrogens. It works with hydrogen 40H, the moving centre with H24. The emotional centre can work with H12, less laws. In reality, however, it very seldom works with this fine H, fine hydrogen. If the emotional centre were to work with hydrogen 12, its work would be connected with the work of the higher emotional centre. And I was saying this in part one, if we can sort all our centres out, these lower ones, we will then connect with the higher one that's always talking to us, always calling down to us, or trying to advise us, or try to show us the way. And we're not listening because we're not centered enough. We can only hear it when we're all centered and balanced. So another reason to be doing this work is so that you can reach your higher self. In order to regulate and accelerate the work of the lower centres, the primary object must consist in freeing each centre from work foreign and unnatural to it, and bringing it back to its own work, which it could do better than any other centre. So we're trying to make the thinking centre do the thinking, the emotional centre do the emotion, and the feeling centre do the feeling. But also I was saying before, each centre's got three centres within it. So, you know, sometimes you do need to think with a bit of an emotion. So that intellectual centre inside us has that emotional centre in it as part of it. We need to get them all working together. So it's not just these three centres, it's the centres within the centres. We need to get them all balanced as well, so they're all doing the right thing. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. The predominant development of any one centre at the expense of the others produces an extremely one-sided type of man, incapable of further development. And I've met many people in my life, you know, very intellectual, but no emotions in them. Other people that are very emotional, but not much intellect, bless them. And as he says here, they become quite unbalanced. They're only one-sided. And we're trying to bring all three together. You know, I myself have noticed over the last couple of years that it's very overly unbalanced emotional people that are quite caught up in all this shit show, whereas the intellectual people still caught up in the shit show, but maybe coming at it from a different angle, where hopefully we're all centered enough, working on ourselves to be able to see clearly through all this that's going on. Yeah, because we're trying to make it so they all work together in unison for the better development of ourselves. And he reminds us that the wrong, independent or automatic work of the moving centre deprives the other centres of support, and they involuntarily follow the moving centre. Often, therefore, the sole possibility of making the other centres work in a new way is to begin with the moving centre, with the body. A body which is lazy, automatic and full of stupid habits stops any kind of work. And I would agree with that. You know, we need to work on our bodies. You know, I myself, I like to do my qigong. Some people like yoga, some people like tai chi. Any kind of exercise that helps with an esoteric development would be brilliant to be doing. The movements, Gurdjieff movements. I don't know anybody around here that does them, so I have no one to go and do it with. But, you know, if you can find someone to do the movements with, that'd be perfect to go with this work. You know, they all go together. But we become lazy. And I sometimes have to force myself to do my qigong or whatever I'm doing, the sitting exercises, blah, blah, blah. Force myself to do them. But then once I start doing them, I know that it's the right thing to do. It's just getting through that first step, going over that first step of making yourself do something like that. You know, even just stretching exercises in the morning is just fantastic for yourself. You know, great way to start the day, loosen yourself up. You know, go and watch some Bruce Lee exercise videos or something when he talks about all this kind of thing as well. Not necessarily his movies are great, but or get his books on his aphorisms and things. He teaches great ways of developing the body. You know, what's the book I've got? The Art of Expressing the Human Body. That's by Bruce Lee. If you can get hold of that, that's a great book to help you develop your body. Because once you've got the body going, you've got the body's energies flowing through, and then they want to work, they want to do things, and then they start sending energy to the emotional and intellectual centers. So let's do some star stretches. You know, and Ouspensky reminds us, one aspect of the functioning of the body which is indispensable to regulate an enormous amount of energy is wasted on unnecessary muscular tension. Observe and feel it and relax the unnecessary tensions of the muscles. You know, we've got to loosen ourselves up. And I found it very interesting when I got into this kind of work and was taught that, you know, not be sitting when I don't have a TV now, but when I did, you know, feeling through my body and realizing how many tense muscles I had in me. And I'm just sitting watching the TV, you know, I should be nice and relaxed. You know, so I had to learn to do all that, loosen the muscles. You know, you start from the feet and work the way up. You've got to get rid of tension that's not needed. You know, all this tension's blocking us, so we're not letting the energy flow through us. And it's surprising how much tension we have within us. So it's something to be doing on yourselves, becoming aware of your body and seeing where you're holding energy in or blocking energy. Loosen it up. And even just thinking about it, when you, let's say you're going through your body and you suddenly feel, oh yeah, my thighs really got tension. I can feel the hardness in it, the stiffness. And, you know, I'm just beginning to tell it to dissipate. It will start going. Just being aware of it makes it suddenly start. You know, with intention, you work it away. You just have it taken away. Loosen them muscles. Gurdjieff does this exercise where you lie down, relax every muscle in your body. It takes a while. When I first started doing it, it took me ages to do that. I kept finding myself distracted or going off from thinking about it and thinking about something else. But I'd find tension in all kinds of strange places. You know, like most people get it neck, shoulders, you know, we're aware of that. When you start feeling it in your cheeks or in parts of your body that you just didn't think you could get tension there, it's a great release. You need to do that kind of thing. I shouldn't be telling you need to, but it's a great thing to do. Right, I'm going to go now to Orage. And this is from C.S. Nott's books. And Orage reminds us, when the three centers are able to work with equal intensity at the same time, then the three main wheels of the human machine will run smoothly and will not interfere with one another, because they want to work together. They want to work in harmony. Suddenly they're like, yeah, I want to do this work. You know, and the wheels start going round, centers start spinning and doing the right thing at the right speed, the right momentum in a harmonious vibrational way, creating the energy that we need to go forward. And Raj reminds us, the world perception of a man of our time and his way of living are not the conscious expression of himself as a whole, but on the contrary, are the unconscious manifestation of only one of the three parts of him. Our psychic life is not a whole which acts as a repository for our perceptions and as a source of our expressions. On the contrary, it is divided into three separate entities, which have almost nothing in common, being different both in their substance and their function. These three separate and quite distinct parts, sources of the intellectual, emotional, and instinctive moving life of a man, each taken in the sense of the whole set of functions proper to it, are called by Gurdjieff's system the thinking center, the instinctive moving center, and the emotional center. Each truly conscious perception and expression of a man must be the result of simultaneous and coordinated working of all three centres, each of which must take its part in the whole task. It must supply its quota of associations. The working of the centres in modern man is almost always unconnected, with the result that his intellectual, emotional, and moving instinctive functions fail to complete and correct one another. They travel along different paths, they rarely meet. And so his moments of real consciousness are very few. And we're trying to make them meet. We're trying to get them to work together, travel along that path and come together. So everything's going forward in the right way. And Nott reminds us, and this is very apt for today, 96% of our civilization is concerned with the instinctive moving center, the planetary body, 3% with real culture, the emotions, 1% with why, the real mind. And that's true. I know many people that just have no questions about what their life's about, you know, and sometimes used to laugh or poo-poo me for going, why? Or, you know, asking questions about life, the universe and everything. Many people have no interest in that kind of thing at all, which is a real shame. They're just living for themselves, which is how they want to be. You know, they'll wake up at some point, whether it's this life or another life. But if we're thinking and asking questions like, why? And then can also make our emotional side work, which he's saying again is a small percentage. Most people, like he's saying here, 96% of people live in their instinctive formatory apparatus, just go about with no conscience or consciousness at all. And we're developing our conscience and our consciousness because we need both to work properly and wake up and be real in these crazy times in this lunatic asylum that we live on. So I hope this little series has helped you. I divided it up into 3 because I thought there was quite a lot to think about in each person's quotes, like from Ouspensky to Nott to Gurdjieff himself. And this way, hopefully you will go and look up the books themselves and get books and read the books about them, of course. And I wish you all well, and I look forward to any comments you have to say or get in touch or whatever. Until next time, thank you for watching, and peace and out.